Welcome to 101 East. I'm Steve Chow. On the peaceful suburban streets of Australia, the horrors of Syria's civil war are difficult to comprehend. But more and more young Australians with no experience of war are joining the fight and taking up arms with listed terrorist groups like the notoriously brutal Islamic State.
Bring every nation that you want to come and fight us. Bring your planes. Bring everything you want to us.
Australia has contributed one of the largest number of foreign fighters per capita to the conflicts in Syria and Iraq. This week, Elise Potaka investigates what drives these young Australians to the front line.
A hostage situation in central Sydney. The perpetrator is a Muslim man bearing the black Shahada flag.
This woman is running from the scene of a hostage
Pictures have just emerged from that siege site.
Reports came through that there were police with shotguns outside. Police operation underway in Sydney CBD. People advised to...
Reaction quickly centres on whether this is a terrorist attack. The media and public ask if the group known as ISIL, which wants to establish an Islamic State, has made good on its pledge to target Western countries like Australia. For months, I've been speaking to young Australians who support banned groups like ISIL in Syria and Iraq. On this day, like everyone, I feared the siege was a related attack.
I think because terrorism is happening all over the world, it's something that we can't really escape.
Even though it was a lone wolf, and he's obviously got networks everywhere, and I don't think no one would believe that it wasn't a terrorist attack.
The siege ends. 2 hostages are dead, along with the gunman. The country's alert level was raised to an all-time high just months earlier.
There are, I regret to say, people who would do us harm. And regrettably, some of them are Australian citizens, Australian residents.
The man behind the siege was an Australian citizen with a disturbing criminal record. But he'd also recently pledged support for an Islamic State. This linked him with a bigger problem that's being felt strongly in Muslim communities across Australia and the world. According to the UN, around 15,000 foreign fighters have taken up arms in Syria and Iraq with groups like ISIL. Australians from suburbs like this one make up one of the largest contingents of Western foreign fighters per capita. I meet a family in Sydney's western suburbs who fear the worst.
Oh my God, I feel sick. I can't speak anymore. I can't eat. I don't want to see anybody anymore. Every day I go in their bed and their clothes. I start to smell him. I cry.
4 of Bassima El Baf's sons recently left home on a secret journey.
Suddenly, stop all. Empty house, nothing. I feel in my heart very broken, inside my heart broken.
Look after Mum? Yeah.
They'd told their parents they were going to Thailand for a week-long holiday. Their unsuspecting father, Isam, took them to the airport. Police say they landed in Thailand before catching another flight to Turkey. The family received a text message saying, "See you in paradise." It said the 4 brothers were in Syria.
Allahu Akbar.
The brothers have been called cleanskins by the authorities. They have no criminal records and were not under surveillance by federal police. The youngest, Taha, is 17. He's seen here in an anti-bullying video produced by his high school.
I don't believe it, what happened. Somebody's friend make him like this, brainwash. I don't know what happened.
We had a guy like used to come to my son, Bilal. Yeah, he used to come like so often here, sit outside my place in his car. I sit for an hour. But that's the guy I had a feeling, I had to brainwash my kids.
Issam and Bassima fled civil war in Lebanon for a more peaceful life in Australia.
We're paralysed, we're really helpless and I can't do nothing because we miss them a lot,
أنا عامل لك تعب ما فيني أعيش بلاكم يا مام. Coming back.
The Australia that became their parents' sanctuary was what the El Baf boys sought to flee. And they're not alone. Over 100 Australians have travelled to Syria and Iraq to fight with listed terrorist groups. This has propelled authorities into action. Police have carried out high-profile raids on people suspected of funding and recruiting Australians to take up arms overseas. National security laws have been tightened, giving authorities unprecedented power to monitor suspects.
This message I deliver to you.
But it hasn't stopped recruitment propaganda flowing from overseas.
And I deliver this message to you, especially the people of Australia.
Like the El Baf brothers, 17-year-old Abdullah Elmir from Sydney ran away without telling his parents. He's now a poster boy for ISIL in Iraq, threatening the country that he once called home.
And to the leaders, to Obama, to Tony Abbott, I say this, these weapons that we have, these soldiers, we will not stop fighting, we will not put down our weapons until we reach your lands, until we take the head of every tyrant, and until the black flag is flying high in every single land.
On social media, these videos spread quickly from one anonymous ISIL supporter to another, glorifying a path to martyrdom.
Allahu Akbar. This isn't ISIS versus the coalition, it's Islam versus the world. Which side are you on?
Jihad is fighting. We live in a world where everybody's allowed to fight except the Muslims.
For more than 6 months, I've followed Australians online who support known terrorist groups. Their posts are a mix of graphic violence and pop culture references, a reminder of where they've come from. One person I made contact with is an 18-year-old former grade A student from Sydney who's now in Syria. He dropped out of university to join ISIL last year and agrees to talk if I don't reveal his identity. He goes by the name Abu Tawheed. So why did you want to leave Australia and go over to Syria?
If the religion was just praying and fasting, I'd be fine living in Australia. But the religion is much bigger than that. There's no doubt that fighting is part of the religion. We have the word jihad is the word used in the Quran for fighting. Jihad is two types. Jihad, we have offensive and defensive jihad.
He claims he's not fighting, but is working for ISIL in administration.
Our problem is with every single person that tries to stop the implementation of Sharia in our lands and makes his own man-made laws and uses them to combat the Sharia.
He tells me that ISIL's aim is to fight against and terrorise those who want to stop the formation of an Islamic State. What do you think of ISIL's violence and beheadings and killing of people, including, Shia Muslims, journalists? What do you make of that?
It depends who you're talking about. The Islamic State doesn't kill civilians. People are killed because they're in the battles, because they're on the front line, fighting the Muslims. Be it fighting with their hands, or fighting with their tongue, or fighting in with the media, or fighting in any other way. Fighting doesn't simply also mean that you're carrying weapons.
His family came to Australia from the Middle East. Like many young fighters, he left without their knowledge.
I would rather live here in the Islamic State with bread and water rather than live in Australia where there's everything that you could possibly imagine, simply because the Sharia is implemented here.
Back Back in the community he left behind, Australia's Muslims are suffering the fallout from these kinds of views and actions. Jamal Rifi, a doctor in Western Sydney, has spoken out against ISIL supporters in Australia.
السلام عليكم. كيفك اليوم حاج؟
This is, I do quite often. Very elderly patient I need to go and see. Come into people's home, sit down, having coffee and having a drink. And they talk. They talk not just about their health issue, but also about social issues.
One current topic of conversation is the backlash against Muslims.
Unfortunately, what happens to us is, because maybe there's a bit of things that are going on overseas and whatnot, they assume, we're all radical or we're all extremists and really Muslim is a beautiful religion. It's very peaceful. A cousin of mine got targeted. They tried to take the scarf off her and go back, and a friend of mine nearly got run over by a guy on a motorbike.
I have no doubt there are racist elements within the Australian society. But at the same time, there are extremist and radical elements within the Muslims community. And these two people feed on each other. And I always said, racisms and extremisms are the two faces of the same coin.
Dr. Rifi says that for Muslim Australians, discrimination is nothing new. But the rise of groups like ISIL has made things much worse.
First of all, we saw how our peaceful religion being transformed into a very vicious, brutal religion by the action of the Islamic State. What can I say? We are living this tragedy. I just feel for the mums and dad. Right? And I'm totally angry about the one who facilitated their travel. I'm angry about the person who made it happen. I'm angry about the authority, that the fact that actually they didn't nip it in the bud. And these are young people.
Dr. Rifi and others around him are looking at why young Muslims are joining the fight and who's encouraging them.
And the majority of brainwashing is taking place through the social media and also some evil hate preachers. They give them this idea that they can turn from zero to hero just by making the decision to go and join the fight in Syria.
Today, inshallah, is going to be a start of a series of lessons.
The hate preachers Dr. Rifi blames are often self-styled sheikhs who speak in smaller, unregulated centres. I contact one cleric who has a reputation for promoting radical views.
You should work hard to unite. Forget our
25-year-old MOHAMMED THORNE has lectured and taught at a number of controversial prayer centres across Australia that have also hosted supporters of Al-Qaeda and ISIL.
I see that it's a right for the Muslims to establish what they call an Islamic State. Now, if the Muslims were able to establish that state without violence, then definitely that's the solution that everyone wants. Realistically, that's not going to happen. So there has to be a fight, there has to be a struggle in order for that to happen.
He says Muslims should be allowed to fight in Syria and Iraq.
On one side, they stop Muslims from going. They say it's a war-torn country. They say it's not a place to be. It's this and that. They cancel people's passports, and on the other hand, they're sending their own soldiers. And there is a double standard here. There is unfairness going on, and as a Muslim, you realise that. I'm pretty sure that if they want.
He denies those who go over pose a risk to Australia.
He's leaving, number one, to serve a cause and to fulfil a purpose. Plus, he's doing what he sees as a religious obligation. So, I don't think anyone that goes would want to come back.
But the Australian government says more than 20 Australians have re-entered the country after fighting, and 20 others are believed to have died. JOSIAH TURNBULL's brother is among them.
Do you ever wonder why your brother decided to, give up
the beach, sun, peace, to go over to Syria?
I don't really think about it. It was his choice. You know, if he wanted to be somewhere, he would be there. He must have felt pretty hard about it before he went. So it must have been something he wanted to do.
In early 2014, Josiah's brother, Tyler Casey, died in Syria. Authorities say he was fighting for al-Qaeda-backed Jabhat al-Nusra. The brothers grew up in a strict Christian family. In his teens, Tyler converted to Islam. He took the name Yusuf Ali and moved to Sydney, where he'd preach on the streets.
Alhamdulillah, today that there's a lady here, Shani, who was accepted Islam. So
since his brother's death, Josiah says he's been monitored by authorities.
Oh, well, get some people from terrorism group in the city, you know, they come knock on my door sometimes, ask me questions, take me in, investigate me, interview me. It's just stressful, you know, like, it's just added stress I don't need, you know, it just makes things worse.
Have you ever thought about going over to Syria?
Oh, yeah, I definitely will. I'll wait till it all blows over first, so it's not dangerous. I'll go find my brother somewhere over there.
But wanting to find his brother's body makes Josiah a risk in the eyes of authorities. The fighting, what's going on there at the moment, do you have any interest in that?
Not at all. No, that's not me. That was my brother's life.
Josiah lives in the northern Australian city of Brisbane, but he's come to Sydney to find out more about Tyler's life before he left for the conflict.
I knew who my brother Tyler was up there, who he was to me and my family, but I wanted to come down here and find out who Yusuf was, you know. His religious side and the people he knew down here.
This is a suburb where Josiah's brother used to live before he went to Syria. He's just gone up the road to have a chat with a few guys who knew his brother. This area has been under a lot of scrutiny in recent times, and he's been told that media is not really welcome, we're not really welcome to follow him with cameras.
Hello? Hey bro, it's Joey. Yusuf, brother.
Hey Joey, how you going, mate?
One former friend does agree to speak on camera. That evening, Josiah meets Adam SAYADI at his kebab shop. He remembers the reaction when Tyler died.
I can see people were shocked about it. They were telling me, oh, Yusuf Ali died. They were talking about it, oh, I can't believe he died, I can't believe he went, I can't believe it, what did he do? He was always humble. The way he would talk to me, you know, would preach me in a nice way, in a way like, you shouldn't do that, you should be God-fearing, you know, you should fear God all the time, you know. He's the type of person where he has to go out, you know, also like spend time, you know, spend time with his mates, go out to restaurants, you know, have dinner with his mates.
I know who he was, you know, to me, but to everyone else, you know, he's been portrayed as a terrorist, you know.
Yeah.
That's
upsetting, man. It's just too upsetting hearing about that, because people that do know him, they're going to talk good about him. People that don't know him, they're going to just talk negative.
It's been a year since his brother was killed, and Josiah is still coming to terms with his loss.
I send him Facebook messages still to this day. Yeah, I just miss him, you know, just being there. You know, it was good for me, you know, he guided me through a lot of things.
The Australian government says it wants to stop people like Tyler from travelling to Syria and Iraq. One measure has been particularly controversial.
I have also cancelled around 75 passports and refused to issue around 10 to stop extremists leaving Australia to fight in conflicts.
I've come to Melbourne, where an 18-year-old man was shot dead after allegedly stabbing 2 police officers. Police say Newman Haider was under surveillance. His passport had been cancelled in the weeks prior. He'd been associated with a group promoting radical Islam in the past, but this incident was described as a lone wolf attack.
Well, one of a young community member was shot here by the police. We don't know what was the reason, what happened. No one knows it.
BASSET SAFI is a member of the close-knit Afghan community.
They left Afghanistan to have a good future for their kids, and now all of a sudden these kids, not even knowing what they're supporting these terrorist organizations such as Taliban and others around the world, although they can't do anything.
Islam tells us that before jumping to conclusion,
the Afghan community is trying to make sense of why some young people are adopting radical views. Imam KHALIL HAMID knew Numan Haider and his family. He says some parents are so worried about radicalisation that they're stopping their children from attending mosque. At his Friday prayer session, Imam KHALIL brings fathers and sons together to deliver a message.
Terrorism in any form, be it a state terrorism, or be an individual, or be as a group, that a group of people conduct that, is rejected by Islam.
But Imam KHALIL also worries about the approach that police are taking towards young Muslims.
What happens that as a community leader, as a religious leader, these people that they are on the watch list, or their passport has been cancelled, or whatever the case might be with them. But if we do not do it in a proper way and channel it in a favorable way, then it would have backlashes. And this is the thing that I fear and I am scared of.
Neil Gagan is the head of counter-terrorism with the Australian Federal Police, tasked with tracking the country's would-be jihadis.
The laws are in place to protect the Australian community, the entire Australian community, for terrorism. They're not a target or a way of blunting Islam.
He says that cancelling passports of suspected jihadis also stops them committing acts of violence abroad.
We have international treaty obligations to ensure that we don't export our problem. In other words, that we have to ensure that we keep the international community safe from people that we think are going to do harm. So therefore, we have an obligation to cancel the passport of people that we suspect are going to travel offshore to undertake, in this particular instance, terrorism-related activity.
But he admits, despite all of Australia's counter-terrorism measures, some still slip through the cracks.
Yeah, look, I'd say that the last dozen or so people that we've had leave the country, and again, this is over a fairly extended period of time, weren't known to law enforcement. But innocent kids who are travelling potentially for the first time ever overseas are really difficult to pick up. If there was a particular demographic or a profile, there is something probably more we could do to stop people from travelling.
Halfway across the world, young Australians continue to make it to the front lines. Abu Tawheed is adamant that religion comes before everything, even family. He says his parents should never have left the Middle East for Australia.
Our parents left for materialistic reasons. And we see that they betrayed their religions, and they betrayed their children in that sense. And so now we feel it's an obligation to go back to those countries and implement the Sharia in its full capacity.
Can you understand that your parents and your parents' generation might find it really difficult to understand why you would want to give up everything that they fought for?
The problem is in the perspective. We don't see living in a peaceful country when Muslims are being destroyed in another country as a good thing.
The teenager tells me he's prepared to pay the ultimate price. Do you worry about dying?
Not at all. If I die, then I'm considered shaheed because I'm here for the sake of Allah. I only left my country for the sake of this religion. So if I die, I'm considered a martyr.
And if he dies, there's no shortage of young Australians standing ready to take his place. Whether they're drawn by the promise of adventure, a sense of purpose, brotherhood or ideology, it's governments and families back home who are left to pick up the pieces.